At a high school, a black boy did everything he could to stay away from the bullies. Move quietly. Don't look at them. Put up with it. That was the only way to get by in a school where the loud, cruel, and untouchable ruled. But no matter how careful he was, every day was the same. He was pushed in the halls, laughed at, his things stolen and thrown on the floor like trash. Then they brought up his father. Then they went too far. That day, he didn't take it. He fought back, and everything changed. Jamal Carter had taught himself to stay small, to be invisible. At Southside High, he moved like a ghost, silent, unnoticed. He knew the rules. Keep your head low. Don't look them in the eye. Don't give them a reason to bother you. For a while, it worked, until it didn't. That afternoon, Jamal left his last class, heading to his locker. Then he heard the voices. "Yo, Carter!" Troy Parker's voice was loud, mocking, like he was already laughing at a joke, and Jamal was the punchline. Jamal kept walking, hoping, foolishly, that maybe they'd leave him alone this time. They never did. A hard shove from behind sent him stumbling. He almost fell but caught himself just in time. Laughter exploded behind him. "My bad," Marcus Hill said, voice fake with pretend sympathy. "Didn't see you there, bro." Jamal took a slow breath, forcing his face to stay blank. He didn't answer, didn't give them the reaction they wanted. That only made it worse. "Man, he really thinks he can ignore us?" Troy smirked, stepping in front of Jamal, blocking his path. Behind him, Eric Sanders and Marcus spread out, trapping him. Troy grabbed Jamal's backpack strap. "What's in here, huh?" Before Jamal could react, Troy yanked it off his shoulder. "Damn, this thing's heavy," Troy said, unzipping it. "What, you carrying bricks? Oh, wait, just a bunch of nerd stuff." He pulled out books and notebooks, then turned the bag upside down, dumping everything on the floor. Jamal's fists tightened as his things scattered. Pens rolling, papers flying. His sketchbook landed open, pages bent. He reached for it. A foot slammed down on the cover. Jamal froze. Troy grinned, pressing his shoe harder into the book. "Oh, you want to pick this up?" "Go ahead, Carter. Be a good little nerd and clean up your mess." Jamal's hand shook. His chest burned. Around them, students watched. Some whispered. Some recorded with their phones. No one helped. "Hold up," Marcus laughed, kicking one of Jamal's textbooks down the hall like a soccer ball. It hit a locker, pages tearing. "Damn, bro, I think he needed that," Eric said, grinning. "Oops," Marcus added, smirking. Jamal's fingers twitched. His father's words played in his head. "You wait. You don't start it. But when it starts, you end it. Not yet. Not yet." He forced the anger down, staying still. Not yet. Troy crouched, his face too close to Jamal's. "You know, Carter," he said, voice low just for him. "I was gonna let you off easy today, but you keep acting like you're better than us. Like you're too good to talk to us. Like you think you're something special." Jamal's jaw clenched. "But you ain't," Troy continued, smug. "You're nothing. Just a quiet little nobody, hoping someone's gonna save you. But guess what? No one's coming, Carter. No one ever does." Jamal looked up, meeting his eyes. For the first time, Troy hesitated. Just for a second. A flicker of something. Fear? Doubt? Then it was gone, hidden behind his usual smirk. Troy stood up straight. "Go ahead, pick up your—" He stepped back, nodding at the mess on the floor. Marcus and Eric laughed like they'd already won. Jamal took a slow breath. He bent down, grabbing his sketchbook first. He wiped off the dirt, checking for torn pages. He moved carefully, gathering his things without a word. Southside Chicago was a place where strength meant survival, where silence often meant giving up. But for Jamal Carter, silence wasn't weakness. It was a choice. At 16, he was tall but thin, with sharp eyes that hid more than they showed. His clothes were plain, his attitude calm. The wire-framed glasses on his nose made him look more like a quiet student than a fighter, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Because at Southside High, where the tough ruled and the weak suffered, staying unnoticed was the smartest move. Jamal wasn't weak. Far from it. Every morning before sunrise, he trained at the gym with his father, Raymond Carter, a man whose hands showed the marks of many fights. Raymond had once dreamed of being a champion boxer, but life had other ideas. A few bad matches, some fixed fights, and a career that never took off left him running a small boxing gym instead. But that didn't mean he had nothing to teach. In fact, Raymond had learned the most important lesson of all, knowing when to fight and when to walk away. That was the lesson he hammered into his son every day, as the steady thud of fists hitting punching bags filled the quiet gym. "You're getting faster," Raymond said, watching Jamal throw a sharp 1-2 combo at the bag. His movements were smooth, controlled, but something was off. "But you're still holding back." Jamal paused, wiping sweat from his face. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His father always saw right through him. "What's going on?" Raymond leaned against the ropes, arms crossed. "Something's on your mind. You're fighting like you're carrying a burden." Jamal kept his eyes down, tightening the tape around his hands. Part of him wanted to say it didn't matter, that it was just another normal day. But the words stuck in his throat. His father wouldn't believe him anyway. Raymond always knew when something was wrong. For a second, Jamal thought about shrugging it off. What was the point in talking? Complaining wouldn't fix anything. But then he remembered Troy's laughter, Marcus's mocking grin, the way the whole school just watched, never stepping in, never caring. His hands clenched into fists. He took a slow breath. Finally, he spoke. "It's the same thing every day. Troy, Eric, and Marcus never stopped. No matter what Jamal did, they pushed him into lockers, took his things, and talked badly about him. Nobody stepped in. Nobody cared. His father, Raymond, listened quietly, nodding slowly. He didn't cut Jamal off. That was one thing about Raymond. He let Jamal speak without pushing him to say more than he wanted. When Jamal finally looked up, Raymond let out a breath and rubbed his short gray beard. "Let me ask you something," Raymond said. "What's the most important rule in boxing?" Jamal frowned. He knew where this was going. "Don't start a fight you can't win." Raymond shook his head. "That's part of it. But the real rule, the real lesson, is knowing when to stand up. You don't throw the first punch, but you better throw the last one. You wait until the right moment, until you know they'll never mess with you again." Jamal let those words sink in. His father wasn't telling him to pick fights. He was telling him to finish them, to make sure that when he finally stood up, there would be no next time. No more chances for those who thought he was weak. Jamal nodded, tightening the wraps around his hands. He didn't say anything else, but something inside him changed. The anger and frustration he'd carried for so long felt different now. It wasn't just something to put up with, it was something to get ready for. The next morning, Jamal walked into Southside High like usual, head down, shoulders tense, blending into the crowd. The halls were loud with slamming lockers, squeaking shoes, and bursts of laughter. Just another day. But in the back of his mind, his father's words played on repeat. Wait for the right moment. He didn't know if today was that moment. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. But it was coming. As he reached his locker, he felt it. They were nearby. He didn't even need to turn around. "Hey, Carter!" Jamal didn't react right away. He kept his movements slow, turning his locker combination carefully. Then a hand smacked the back of his head. Not hard enough to knock him over, just enough to remind him who was in charge. "Don't ignore me, loser," Troy Parker sneered. Jamal took a deep breath before turning to face him. There they were, Troy, grinning like always, Eric standing behind him like a bodyguard, and Marcus, the loudmouth who laughed at his own jokes. "You look stressed, Jamal. Marcus said, smirking. Bad night? Or still upset about yesterday? Jamal stayed quiet. He wouldn't give them the reaction they wanted. Troy leaned in, lowering his voice. Or maybe, he said, you're just mad because everyone saw that video of your dad getting knocked out. Jamal's fingers twitched. Yeah, man. I watched it last night, Marcus added, shaking his head like he was upset. That guy got hit more than a punching bag. Eric laughed. That's your family, huh? A bunch of punching bags. He smirked. No wonder you never fight back. It's in your blood. Laughter filled the hallway, the kind that hurt worse than fists. Jamal felt anger burning inside, but he didn't let it show. He stood tall, his face blank. His father's words echoed in his mind. Stay calm. Don't hesitate when the time comes. Jamal waited, letting them think they had won. Then, slowly, he turned his head and stared at Troy. You guys watch boxing now? His voice was cool, almost mocking. He looked at each of them one by one. Funny, I didn't think soft guys like you cared about real fights. The laughter died. Troy's smirk faded for a second before turning cold. Marcus's smile wavered. Eric frowned, confused. What did you just say? Troy snapped. Jamal shrugged, his tone easy. I said you're soft. The words hung in the air, sharp, clear, like the first hit in a fight no one had started yet. Jamal could feel the tension, his challenge settling deep in their bones. Marcus let out a scoff, shaking his head. Oh, this guy thinks he's funny now? Eric cracked his knuckles. Nah, he thinks he's tough. Troy's jaw tightened. Then slowly he leaned forward, his voice low. You think we're weak? Jamal held his stare without blinking. Yeah. Troy took a sharp breath and stepped back, nodding to himself, his hands clenched into fists. All right, Carter. Let's see if you still think that when we're done with you. Eric grinned, rolling up his sleeves. Marcus stretched his fingers like a pianist preparing to play. Jamal's heartbeat steadied. His muscles felt loose, ready. He knew what was coming, but this time, he wasn't waiting to be hit. This time, he was ready to finish it. Jamal barely dropped his bag before Eric charged at him, throwing a wild right hook aimed at his jaw. It was sloppy, driven by ego and brute force, the kind of punch that only worked on inexperienced kids. But Jamal wasn't just any kid. He had spent his whole life watching his father train fighters, learning every move like second nature. He saw the punch coming before Eric even fully swung. The shift in weight, the tense shoulder. A tiny tell most wouldn't notice. Jamal dodged left, letting the fist cut through empty air. The crowd gasped, but Jamal wasn't done. In the same motion, he twisted and drove a sharp counter into Eric's ribs. A heavy thud echoed. Eric's breath left him in a rush, his knees buckling. Jamal didn't wait. He turned, eyes locking onto Marcus, who was trying to sneak up from the side. Marcus swung wildly, but Jamal ducked, then surged forward with a quick uppercut to his stomach. Marcus choked, stumbling back, clutching his gut. Troy, watching with narrowed eyes, suddenly realized this wasn't going as planned. His usual game, picking on the weakest kid, humiliating him, had just backfired. Jamal wasn't just defending himself, he was dismantling them. Jamal faced Troy, rolling his shoulders. His stance was calm, natural. He wasn't reckless or angry, just controlled, precise, dangerous. Troy clenched his fists and stepped forward. All right, Carter, let's see what you've really got. Troy was faster than the others, more confident, but confidence didn't win fights, skill did. He threw a quick jab, testing Jamal's defense. Jamal tilted his head just enough to avoid it. Another jab, then a right cross. Jamal read every move. When Troy committed to a left hook, Jamal stepped in, catching his wrist mid-swing. Troy's eyes widened in shock. Before he could react, Jamal twisted, throwing him off balance, then landed a clean right to his cheekbone, not enough to break anything, but enough to send a message. Troy stumbled back, slamming into the lockers. For the first time, he wasn't the one standing over someone. He was the one on the ground. The hallway fell silent. Phones were out, recording. Whispers spread, shock replacing the usual mockery. Jamal Carter, the quiet kid they all underestimated, had just taken down the school's biggest bully. Eric, still hunched over, and Marcus, gasping for air, didn't move to help Troy. Jamal stepped closer, looking down at him. This was the moment his father had talked about. He could humiliate Troy now, just like Troy had done to others. But he didn't. He just stared at him, voice calm. "I told you. You're weak." Then he turned, grabbed his bag, and walked away. The silence behind him was heavy. Jamal didn't look back. He could feel their stares, the stunned whispers. Moments ago, they had been spectators to his suffering. Now they had witnessed something else, a shift in power, a truth they couldn't ignore. Troy Parker, the unchallenged king of Southside High, was on the ground, and Jamal Carter had put him there. Jamal adjusted his bag on his shoulder, his heart still pounding. The rush of adrenaline hadn't faded yet, but he forced himself to stay calm. He didn't regret what he did, not for a second, but he knew this wasn't over. It never was. The bell rang, snapping the hallway back to life. Students started moving again, flowing around Jamal like water. Some gave him cautious looks, others whispered in shock. He caught bits of their words as he passed. "Did you see that? He took down Troy like it was nothing. I got the whole thing on video. Jamal can actually fight. I've never seen Troy lose before." Jamal ignored it all, pushing through the noise. His mind was already on what came next. There were always consequences. By the time he reached his next class, the principal's voice crackled over the speaker. "Jamal Carter, please report to the main office immediately." Jamal let out a slow breath. There it is. He didn't rush. He walked at his own pace, steps steady. He had expected this, had been ready for it since the moment he threw that first punch. Fighting back and winning always came with a price. When he walked into the office, Troy was already there, sitting in one of the chairs against the wall. His lip was split, a bruise forming on his cheek. He wasn't smirking now. His jaw was tight, hands clenched in his lap. He looked up when Jamal entered. Their eyes locked, tense, silent. There was no pride in Troy's gaze now, only anger, and something else, something close to fear. Principal Holloway sat behind her desk, hands folded. She was a middle-aged woman with sharp features and tired eyes, the kind that had seen too many fights, too many excuses. Beside her stood Officer Daniels, the school cop, arms crossed. His presence was a warning. Jamal knew how this looked. A black kid and a white kid in the office after a fight. One of them hurt, one of them not. "Sit down, Mr. Carter," Principal Holloway said, nodding to the chair beside Troy's. Jamal stayed standing. "Am I suspended?" Her expression didn't change. "You're being reviewed for discipline." Jamal took a slow breath. "For defending myself?" "For fighting," she corrected. Jamal glanced at Troy, who sat there like the victim, like he hadn't started it. "Watch your tone," Officer Daniels cut in, voice hard. Jamal clenched his fists. He could argue. He could tell them everything, the months of bullying, the shoving, the stolen things, the insults. He could explain how they mocked his father, how they pushed him until he snapped. But would it matter? Would they care? He had seen how this went before. He wasn't stupid. Instead, he took a sharp breath and let it out. "Fine. What's the punishment?" Holloway watched him silently for a while, then looked at Troy. 3-day suspension, both of you." Troy turned to her quickly. "What? Why?" "You were both part of it," she said plainly. "The video proves it." Jamal froze. Video proof? Someone must have sent it to the school, maybe even multiple people. For the first time since entering the office, Jamal felt something surprising. Justice. Troy stammered, losing his calm. "That's not fair. This meeting is over." Holloway interrupted, standing. "You're both dismissed." Troy jumped up and rushed out without another word. Jamal stayed for a moment, letting it sink in. This wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was bigger. The video was out. People had seen the truth. When Jamal stepped into the hallway, he noticed the change instantly. The same students who used to ignore him now looked his way. Some nodded, some whispered, but none acted like he was invisible anymore. As for Troy, he was gone. For the first time in a long while, Jamal Carter walked through Southside High with confidence. Not as a victim, but as someone they finally saw. By lunch, the fight was all anyone discussed. The video had spread fast, not just in school, but online. Clips were shared in chats, posted in feeds, and talked about in hushed voices by students who'd never even spoken to Jamal before. But it wasn't just the fight that got people talking. It was everything leading up to it. The months of teasing. The way Troy and his friends had picked on him for so long without consequences. Everyone saw it happening, but no one stepped in. Until now. For the first time, people weren't just watching. They were asking why it took so long. Why did it have to come to blows before anyone cared? By the next day, the school had to act. During the morning announcements, Principal Holloway's voice came through the speakers, sounding more serious than usual. "Many of you know about the recent fight on school grounds. It has started important talks about bullying, harassment, and the kind of environment we allow here." The classrooms went quiet. Everyone knew what she meant. Southside High does not accept violence, but we also can't ignore what led to it. Many students feel ignored, unsafe, and forced to deal with things no one should face. That stops now. Jamal sat with his arms crossed, eyes locked on the speaker. He expected a warning about fighting, but this was different. Starting today, we're putting new rules in place to stop bullying. There will be a way to report problems without giving your name and stricter punishments. This isn't just about discipline. It's about making sure every student feels safe and respected. Jamal could feel the mood shift. Some kids looked uneasy. Others seemed deep in thought. A few still doubted, but they were all listening. Let me be clear. No one should feel like they have to fight to be heard. If we've failed you, we'll do better. The announcement ended, but the effect stayed. The talk didn't die down. If anything, it grew louder. Kids who'd stayed quiet about being bullied started speaking up. Those who'd laughed or looked away realized their silence was part of the problem. The school's culture, one that let kids like Troy get away with everything, was finally being questioned. As Jamal walked the halls that day, he noticed something else. Troy wasn't smirking anymore. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by something shaky. His friends were pulling away, their loyalty breaking under the truth. For the first time, they were the ones being watched. And Jamal, he didn't need to throw another punch. He'd already won. That afternoon, as Jamal walked home, the cool fall air felt different, lighter. The anger, the frustration of being pushed around was gone. Not because the fight fixed everything, not because Troy and his crew vanished, but because, for the first time, he stood up for himself, and the world finally saw him. When he entered his dad's gym, the smell of sweat and leather greeted him, along with the sound of fists hitting bags. Raymond was wrapping his hands for his next session, but when he saw Jamal, he didn't need to ask what happened. He already knew. "So," Raymond said, setting the wraps aside, "you finally stood up for yourself." Jamal nodded. His father studied him, then pointed to the ring. "Come here." Jamal sighed, dropping his bag. "I just got out of a fight, old man." Raymond smirked. Jamal hesitated, then stepped into the ring. His father raised his fists. Jamal did the same. "You did what you had to do," Raymond said, "but a real fighter keeps moving forward." Jamal threw the first punch, sharp and clean. Raymond nodded in approval. Jamal wasn't just fighting anymore, He was becoming stronger. Join us to share meaningful stories by liking and subscribing. Don't forget to turn on notifications to start your day with important lessons and kindness.
A quiet black girl walks into Brooklyn High. She's here to finish her senior year and stay unnoticed. But before she can even make it through the first week, a white girl in her class decides she's the perfect target. The laughter starts first. Then the whispers. Then the public humiliation. When the bully smirks, convinced it's time for one final performance, the crowd gathers, waiting for the inevitable. But there's something they don't know about the black girl. She's not just the new kid. She's a fighter, trained to battle. And she's about to remind them all exactly what that means. The yellow school bus pulled up to the curb in front of Brooklyn High. Its brakes hissed as the doors creaked open. Students spilled out, laughing and shoving, moving in groups that had long been established. No one paid attention to the girl stepping down last. Her backpack was slung over one shoulder, her expression unreadable. Imani Brooks adjusted her bag and took a steady breath. She scanned the tall brick building ahead of her. It wasn't much different from her old school in Chicago. Same crowded hallways, same noisy students, same unspoken rules of survival. Keep your head down, don't draw attention, and stay out of trouble. That had been her approach at every school before this one. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to finish her last year, get her diploma, and move on. As she walked through the entrance, she felt the usual stares. Whispers followed her. She knew how this worked. A new face always drew curiosity, but the attention was different when you were a black girl in a mostly white school. They weren't just looking at her. They were judging her. Would she be loud? Would she be aggressive? Would she be one of those girls? Imani ignored them. She kept her eyes forward as she searched for her locker. That's when she saw them. Jessica Carter. The name had already been whispered around her on the bus. The tall blonde girl moved with confidence, surrounded by her friends. She wasn't just popular. She was in control. The kind of girl who decided who mattered and who didn't. Next to her stood Monica and Ava, her loyal followers. But what really caught Imani's attention were the two boys with them. Ryan Carter, Jessica's older brother, a senior, and the school's star football player. He had a smirk that said he knew he was untouchable. Beside him was Trey Morales, a skinny, sharp-eyed boy with a loud mouth, the kind of guy who loved the sound of his own voice. Imani knew their type. She had no intention of getting involved with any of them. So she turned back to her locker, spinning the dial on her combination lock. But even as she kept her head down, she could feel it. Jessica's eyes on her, watching, calculating. The first class passed without trouble, but the whispers continued. Someone nudged her in the hallway. She's from Chicago. Think she's one of those tough girls? Imani didn't react. Let them think whatever they wanted. At lunch, she sat alone at an empty table in the corner of the cafeteria. She ate in silence, ignoring the chatter around her. Then the laughter changed. It grew louder, sharper, directed at her. "Well, well, look at this," Jessica's voice rang out, smooth and mocking. Imani didn't look up. She took a sip of her juice. "Oh, is the new girl shy?" Monica sneered. "I think she's just stuck up," Ava added, acting like she's too good to talk to people. The cafeteria went quiet, watching. Imani kept eating, giving them nothing. Then Trey spoke up. "Maybe she doesn't speak English," he joked. Laughter spread. Ryan leaned against her table, towering over her. "Or maybe she's just slow." More laughter. Jessica smirked, waiting for a reaction. She needed one. If the new girl ignored her, That meant she wasn't afraid. And Jessica couldn't have that. She reached forward and flicked Imani's juice cup, spilling it over her food. The cafeteria fell silent. Imani exhaled slowly. She set her fork down, wiped her hands, and stood up calmly. Without looking at Jessica or her friends, she picked up her tray, walked to the trash, and threw it away. Then she laughed. Behind her, laughter erupted again, but it sounded forced, uneasy. Jessica felt it too. Because when Imani finally looked at her before walking away, there was something in her eyes. Not anger, not fear, just a cold, quiet patience. And for the first time in a long time, Jessica Carter felt something she wasn't used to: uncertainty. The tension from the cafeteria spread through the school. By the next class, everyone was whispering about it. It should have been a win for Jessica. Another new kid humiliated. But something about Imani's reaction didn't sit right. She hadn't looked embarrassed. She hadn't even looked angry. It was like she had expected it. Jessica hated that feeling, the loss of control. In class, she tapped her nails on her desk, barely listening to the teacher. Monica leaned over. "That was weird, right?" Jessica forced a smile. "She's faking, trying to look tough." But Monica still looked unsure, and Jessica knew others felt the same. Across the room, Ryan stretched and grinned. "You look stressed, sis." Jessica glared. "Shut up." Ryan chuckled. "Relax. If she wants to act tough, we'll just push harder. She'll break." Trey smirked. "Yeah, maybe we need to turn up the heat." Jessica let their words sink in. Maybe they were right. Maybe Imani was just pretending. But if she thought she could walk around like she was untouchable, she had another thing coming. By the next day, the pressure started to build. Imani could feel it before she even got to school. People looked at her differently now. The energy had shifted. She wasn't just the new kid anymore. Now, she was a challenge. She didn't react. She didn't need to. Walking to her locker that morning, she moved with the same calm, unbothered attitude as always. But the whispers followed her. She really just walked away. She didn't even look mad. What if she's actually dangerous? The rumors spread fast. Soon, Jessica and her crew decided to test her again. It started small. In gym class, Monica and Ava accidentally bumped into her. An elbow here, a shove there. Imani didn't react. That only made them bolder. During basketball, Ryan stole the ball from her every time she got it, shoving her hard enough to make her stumble. Trey laughed. "Damn, new girl. Do you even know how to play?" Imani ignored them. Jessica watched, arms crossed, waiting for Imani to crack. But nothing. Imani took every shove, every insult, every unfair move, and didn't flinch. If anything, she looked bored. It wasn't submission, it was control. Jessica gritted her teeth. That was worse. By lunchtime, Jessica was done playing games. Imani had barely picked up her tray when she felt it. A hard shove from behind. She stumbled forward. Her tray tipped. Food splattered across the floor. The cafeteria went silent. Then the laughter started. Jessica smirked as she stepped forward, standing over Imani like she'd already won. "Oh no," she mocked. "Did the poor little new girl drop her lunch? That's so sad." Eva and Monica laughed. Ryan leaned against a table, smirking. Trey recorded on his phone. Other students pulled out their cameras. This was it. This was the moment Imani was supposed to break. Jessica leaned in. "What's wrong? Gonna cry? Maybe you should run home to Mommy." More laughter. More cameras. But Imani didn't move. She stood completely still for a second, fists clenched. Then, slowly, she looked up at Jessica, and she smiled. It was small, almost unnoticeable. But Jessica saw it. For the first time, Jessica felt something cold crawl up her spine. The cafeteria was still laughing, but Jessica suddenly wasn't sure why. It didn't feel like winning anymore. Imani bent down, calmly picked up her tray, and, without breaking eye contact, walked away. Laughter exploded again, but it wasn't the same. Jessica could hear the confusion beneath it, the whispers. That wasn't fear in Imani's eyes. It wasn't anger. It was something else entirely. And for the first time in her life, Jessica Carter felt doubt. That night, Imani sat at the kitchen table, staring at her untouched plate of food. Her father, Darius Brooks, stood at the counter, pouring himself coffee. His sharp eyes flicked toward her every so often. He didn't need to ask if something was wrong. Darius had seen that look before, the quiet, controlled stillness of someone holding back. He set his coffee cup down and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "All right," he said, voice steady. "Tell me." Imani exhaled slowly, replaying the cafeteria scene in her head. The spilled food, the laughter, Jessica's smug face. "I don't want to fight," she finally said. Darius studied her. "And yet you're thinking about it." Imani's hands curled into fists. "I don't want to fight," she repeated, her voice tighter this time. "But I don't want to be that girl either. The one who just takes it. The one they think they can push around. I walked away today, and it made things worse." Darius took a slow sip of coffee, choosing his words carefully. "You walked away because you didn't want to hurt them." Imani looked up sharply. He met her gaze, unblinking. "I trained you to defend yourself, not to be a weapon. But I also trained you to know when people like that won't stop, until you give them a reason to." She swallowed. She knew that truth too well. She had grown up in a fighting gym, surrounded by fighters. Her father had been a professional before becoming a trainer. She'd been sparring with grown men since she was 8. Footwork, instincts, reading an opponent, all drilled into her since childhood. But that power had consequences. The last time she'd really fought back, a boy ended up in the hospital. It ruined her life. New school, new city, a promise to herself to never let that side out again. She took a slow breath. "If I fight back, it won't end there. It never does." Darius nodded. "True, but walking away doesn't always end it either. If they think you're weak, they'll keep pushing until they break you." Imani met his eyes. "So, what do I do?" Darius pulled out a chair and sat across from her, leaning forward. "You don't start fights, Imani, but you finish them." His voice was calm but firm. "You don't need to prove anything to them. But if they leave you no choice, you make sure they never try it again." She exhaled, the tension in her chest loosening slightly. Darius sat back. "I know you. I know your control. You're not some wild kid throwing fists out of anger. You make decisions. You calculate." A pause. Then he added, "So, if you have to fight, don't do it to teach them a lesson." His gaze locked onto hers. "Do it to end the fight before it even begins." Imani let his words sink in. She wasn't looking for a fight, but she knew the fight was coming for her. And when it did, she'd be ready. Jessica Carter couldn't sleep that night. She kept replaying the cafeteria scene. No matter how she twisted it, she couldn't ignore one thing. Imani had smiled. Not flinched, not cowered, just smiled. It wasn't right. It wasn't normal. And it wasn't over. People had laughed, sure, but the whispers afterward had changed. Some even sounded impressed. Jessica's stomach twisted. She wasn't letting some nobody mess with the order of things. By morning, the plan was set. Ryan, Trey, Monica, Ava, all on board. This wasn't just about proving a point anymore. It was about making sure Imani knew her place. Word spread fast. By lunch, everyone knew. After school. Behind the gym. No teachers. No cameras. Just a lesson in humility. Imani knew too. She felt the shift the moment she walked into school. The stares, the curiosity, the pity. She wasn't stupid. She'd been through this before. Different faces, same patterns. She'd spent years avoiding fights, staying quiet, keeping her head down. But people like Jessica never understood silence. They thought it meant weakness. And Imani was done pretending. When the final bell rang, she didn't hesitate. She walked to the back of the school, stepping onto the cracked pavement behind the gym. They were already waiting. Jessica stood in the center, arms crossed, smirking. Monica and Ava flanked her. Ryan and Trey hovered close, their presence a silent threat. Behind them, a crowd had gathered, at least 20 students, some whispering, some filming. Imani stopped a few feet from Jessica. Jessica tilted her head. "Wow, you actually showed up. I thought you'd keep running like yesterday." Imani didn't blink. "I wasn't running." Jessica scoffed. "Please, you didn't even stand up for yourself." Imani exhaled, tilting her head like she was bored. "You think throwing food is a fight?" Jessica's smile twitched. "Oh, don't worry," she said sweetly. "I'll make it a real one." She stepped closer. Imani spoke, her voice calm but final. "I'm here to warn you." Jessica blinked. "Warn me?" Ryan and Trey exchanged glances. Monica and Ava looked confused. Imani's tone was steady. "You don't want to do this." Jessica laughed, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Oh, that's adorable. The new girl's threatening me." "Not a threat," Imani said. "A warning." Jessica hated how her own heartbeat sped up. Hated that Imani wasn't scared. Hated that she suddenly felt like the one making a mistake. Ryan stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "You done talking? Or are we starting this?" Jessica smirked, seizing the out. "You heard her, Rye. She says we don't want to do this, so show her how wrong she is." Ryan rolled his shoulders, stepping up to Imani. He towered over her, 6 inches taller, built like a wall. He grinned like this was a joke. "Don't worry," he mocked. "I'll go easy on—" He swung. It happened in a blink. Imani wasn't there anymore. She stepped inside his reach, grabbed his wrist, and twisted, using his own momentum against him. Ryan's world flipped. 1 second, he was throwing a punch. The next, his back slammed into the pavement so hard the air rushed from his lungs. The crowd gasped. Jessica's stomach dropped. Ryan lay on the ground, coughing, eyes wide with shock. Because that wasn't supposed to happen. That wasn't possible. Imani stepped back. Her face was unreadable. "I warned you." Trey hesitated. His confidence wavered. His body tensed. But he had a reputation to keep. He couldn't back down, not in front of everyone. "Pitch got lucky," he spat. He charged forward. Imani barely moved. She sidestepped at the last second. In one smooth motion, she grabbed Trey's wrist mid-strike, spun behind him, and twisted his arm into a lock. It was so fast, he let out a choked yell. She let him go. Trey stumbled forward, clutching his arm. He stared at her like she was something unreal. The crowd fell silent. Jessica felt her pulse pounding in her skull. She had lost control. Imani stood there, hands relaxed at her sides, completely calm. When she finally looked at Jessica again, her voice was quiet, almost disappointed. "Do you still think I was running?" Jessica didn't answer. She couldn't. For the first time in her life, she knew what it felt like to be the prey. For the first time, Jessica Carter had nothing to say. The silence was heavy. The same crowd that had come to see Imani humiliated now stood frozen, staring in shock. Their disbelief reflected back at Jessica like a warped mirror. Ryan was still on the ground, struggling to breathe, his pride broken. Trey stood stiffly, cradling his arm, jaw clenched tight, as if trying to hold in his shame. Monica and Ava, Jessica's usual followers, were silent. Their smug grins were gone. And Imani? She hadn't moved. She didn't celebrate, didn't mock them, didn't even look pleased. She just stood there, steady, hands at her sides, like none of this had been hard for her. Jessica's nails dug into her palms. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Her mind raced, searching for a way to fix this, to take back control. She needed to remind everyone she was still Jessica Carter, the one who made the rules, the one they feared. Then Imani spoke again, making sure Jessica understood just how badly she had lost. "You thought this was about power," Imani said, her voice soft but firm. "But the truth is, you were never strong to begin with." Jessica felt the words hit like a slap. They burned through her skin, her pride, her whole being. Then Imani turned away, just like that. She left Jessica standing there, humiliated in front of the same crowd that once worshipped her. The movement was so simple, so dismissive. Jessica snapped. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She just acted, lunging forward to grab Imani's hair in a desperate attempt to take back control. It was a mistake. Before Jessica could react, her wrist was caught mid-air, trapped in an iron grip. Imani didn't even turn her head. She just held Jessica's arm there effortlessly, her body completely still. Jessica froze, her breath catching. Then Imani finally turned to look at her. Jessica felt the full weight of that steady, unshakable gaze. Imani's grip tightened slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to show Jessica her own weakness. She leaned in close so only Jessica could hear. "You don't have power over me, and you never will." Then she let go. Jessica stumbled back, her heart pounding violently. Her body had betrayed her in front of everyone. Imani didn't wait for a response. She just walked away. This time the silence wasn't just shock. It was final. Jessica knew it, and worse, everyone else did too. Ryan and Trey weren't smirking. Monica and Ava weren't whispering in her ear. The crowd that once hung on her every word now looked at her differently. Not with fear, but with pity. Jessica couldn't breathe. She hadn't just lost a fight. She'd lost everything. The next morning, Brooklyn High felt different. Jessica walked through the halls with her shoulders squared and chin lifted, her designer bag in place like nothing had changed. But she felt it. The shift, the weight, the whispers following her. For years, she'd controlled this school, decided who mattered and who didn't. Now she was the one being watched, not with admiration or fear, but with doubt, with curiosity. She heard Imani's name murmured behind her, not hers. People weren't talking about Jessica's power anymore. They were talking about how the new girl had destroyed it in less than a week. At her usual cafeteria table, Jessica sat stiffly, barely eating. Monica and Ava were quiet, avoiding eye contact, their loyalty uncertain. Ryan and Trey sat nearby, bruised egos fresh, but silent. No one spoke. For the first time, Jessica wasn't the center of attention. Across the room, Imani sat alone as usual, eating calmly like nothing had happened. But something had. People glanced her way, hesitated near her table. Basketball players nodded respectfully. Girls who'd ignored her before now seemed interested. But Imani didn't care. She wasn't seeking attention or trying to replace Jessica. She'd done what she came to do and moved on. No gloating, no power grab, Because to Imani, Jessica's throne never mattered. Jessica clenched her fork. Maybe she could still fix this. Maybe she could turn things around. A shadow fell across her table. Jessica looked up. Imani stood there. For a moment, Jessica couldn't breathe. Imani didn't sit, didn't lower her voice. She just looked at Jessica, completely calm and in control. "We're done," she said simply. Jessica's throat tightened. Everyone was watching, waiting. The words felt like a final judgment. Jessica had lost. Everyone knew it. Imani didn't wait for a reply. She turned and walked away. Jessica sat frozen as her world crumbled. Imani left the cafeteria without looking back. For the first time in her life, Jessica Carter had no control at all. Jessica wasn't the center of attention anymore. Across the room, Imani sat alone, just like before. She ate her lunch calmly, unbothered, as if nothing had happened. But something had. People kept glancing at her. Some whispered, others just watched. A few hesitated near her table, like they wanted to sit with her. Even some basketball team members nodded at her in respect as they passed. Girls who used to ignore her now seemed curious, but Imani didn't care. She wasn't looking for attention. She wasn't trying to replace Jessica. She had done what she came to do, and now she was done. Jessica hated that the most. Imani hadn't just beaten her, she had moved on. No victory lap, no gloating, no desire to take Jessica's spot at the top. To Imani, the throne never mattered. Jessica's fingers tightened around her fork. She could fix this. She had fixed worse before. Maybe if she changed the story, maybe if she made Imani look bad. Then a shadow fell over her table. Jessica looked up. Imani was standing there. For a second, Jessica forgot to breathe. Imani didn't sit. She didn't lower her voice. She just looked at Jessica, calm and in control. "We're done," she said simply. Jessica's throat closed up. Everyone was listening. She could feel dozens of eyes on them, waiting, watching, holding their breath. The words felt like a final judgment. Jessica had lost, and everyone knew it. Imani didn't wait for a reply. She turned and walked away. Jessica sat frozen, her world falling apart, as Imani stepped out of the cafeteria, leaving everything behind. For the first time in her life, Jessica Carter had no control at all. Join us to share meaningful stories. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to start your day with deep lessons and heartfelt empathy. Trent Dawson ruled the school until he messed with the wrong girl. What happened next shocked everyone. It began with a look, not the kind you ignore, but the kind that stays. The kind that makes you feel unwelcome. 16-year-old Jasmine Whitfield had lived in Summit Ridge, Idaho, for only 3 weeks, but she already knew she didn't fit in. She wasn't surprised. Her father's job forced them to move often, and some towns were friendly, while others made sure newcomers felt out of place. Summit Ridge High was the latter. Jasmine walked through the halls, her backpack hanging from one shoulder, avoiding trouble. Her dad had warned her about boys like Trent Dawson, the type who acted like they owned the school and everyone in it. She had hoped to stay unnoticed, but that hope faded fast. On her third day, Trent made her his new target. It started with whispers when she walked by. Then, his friends laughed just loud enough for her to hear. Next came the insults, about her hair, her voice, even the way she walked. She ignored them. Experience had taught her that was safest. But Trent hated being ignored. One afternoon, Jasmine sat in English class, taking notes as Mr. Holloway talked about The Great Gatsby. A sharp whisper broke the silence. "Hey, new girl!" She didn't look up. "I'm talking to you, Whitfield." She kept her eyes on her notebook, gripping her pen tighter. Trent smirked, leaning back in his chair. I just think it's funny. Some people show up where they don't belong. A few kids giggled. Jasmine kept writing, forcing herself to stay calm. But hey, Trent went on, his voice mocking, maybe you're just lost. A school like this, with people like us, must feel weird, huh? Jasmine's chest tightened, but she stayed silent. She had promised herself not to let boys like him win. Trent wasn't done. He leaned closer. Hey, Whitfield, you deaf? Or is it hard to hear over all that? Trent! Mr. Holloway's voice cut in, sharp and impatient. Do you have something to share with the class? Trent leaned back, raising his hands in fake surrender. No, sir. Just welcoming the new student. Mr. Holloway gave him a sharp look before turning back to the board. Trent flashed Jasmine one last grin before sitting down. She let out a quiet breath. Maybe it's over. Maybe he'll get bored. Then, a folded note landed on her desk. Her fingers hesitated before opening it. Go back to where you came from. Jasmine's chest tightened, but she didn't react. She wouldn't give him the win. She folded the paper, tucked it into her bag, and kept her face blank as class continued. But things were only beginning. Trent Dawson had no idea who her father was, and soon he'd find out. But first, things were about to get much worse. Jasmine had dealt with bullies before. She'd moved enough times to know guys like Trent were everywhere. But bullies had one rule. If you didn't fight back, they pushed harder. Friday. The cafeteria. The room buzzed with noise, trays clattering, voices shouting, the smell of greasy pizza and old fries in the air. Jasmine sat alone at a corner table, earbuds in, pretending not to hear the whispers. Then she felt it. Him. She looked up. Trent stood a few feet away, hands in his Letterman jacket, that same smug grin on his face. Behind him, his friends, Liam, Kyle, and Chase, watched, waiting for the show. You always eat alone? Trent asked. Jasmine stayed silent. You should try making friends. He glanced at her untouched tray, then at his buddies. Or maybe no one wants to sit with you. Kyle snorted. Liam added, maybe she likes being a loner. Trent stepped closer. Or maybe she just doesn't belong here. Jasmine's hands curled under the table, but she didn't move. Trent hated being ignored. In one quick motion, he grabbed her tray and flipped it. Crash! The sound echoed through the cafeteria. Food splattered across the floor, mashed potatoes on her shoes, milk spreading in a white puddle. Gasps, muffled laughs. Jasmine's fists clenched. Trent's grin widened. Oops. She stared at the mess, her face burning. Everyone watched, waiting. Would she cry? Yell? Run? Slowly, she pushed her chair back. Calmly, she wiped her hands with a napkin and stood. She wouldn't give him what he wanted. But Trent wasn't done. As she turned to leave, he blocked her path. Hey, where you going? We're just getting to know each other. Jasmine took a deep breath. Move. The cafeteria went silent. Trent's smile faltered for a second. What was that? His voice dripped with amusement. She met his eyes. I said move. His friends laughed. Whoa! Liam chuckled. She's got a mouth. Trent stepped closer, inches from her now. Or what? Jasmine's pulse pounded in her ears. Her fingers twitched. Then, what the hell is going on here? Miss Reese, the assistant principal, marched over, heels clicking on the tile. Her sharp eyes darted between Jasmine and Trent, then to the spilled food. Trent's grin vanished. He backed up, playing innocent. Nothing, Miss Reese. Just an accident. Miss Reese didn't buy it. She looked at Jasmine. Is that true? Jasmine hesitated. If she told the truth, nothing would change. Guys like Trent never got punished. She glanced around. No one spoke up for her. Swallowing hard, she muttered, "Yeah, accident." Trent smirked. Miss Reese sighed. "Clean this up." And just like that, it was over. As Trent's friends laughed and walked away, he called over his shoulder, "See you Monday, Whitfield." Jasmine stood there, staring at the mess. She thought of her dad, how he always told her to stand up for herself. But what was the point when no one listened? Jasmine grabbed her backpack and walked out of the cafeteria. But this time, she wasn't going to let it slide. The house was silent when she got home, too silent. She dropped her bag by the door and kicked off her shoes, still stained with mashed potatoes from lunch. She didn't even want to look at them. "Jasmine? That you?" Her father's voice came from the kitchen. Elliot Whitfield wasn't a man who missed details. As Summit Ridge's new police chief, he'd spent years reading people, noticing things others overlooked. Jasmine hesitated. "Yeah, it's me." She walked into the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, still in his uniform, holding a fresh cup of coffee. His short hair was graying at the sides, and his sharp brown eyes studied her face before she could even sit down. "You okay?" he asked. She forced a shrug. "Yeah." Chief Whitfield took a slow sip of coffee, still watching her. "How was school?" Jasmine slid into a chair, tracing a scratch on the wooden table. "Fine." A pause. Then he set his cup down. "Try again." She exhaled. She should have known. She could never hide things from him. But part of her didn't want to talk about it. What was the point? Nothing ever changed. Elliot crossed his arms. "Jasmine." She kept her eyes on the table, her voice quieter than she meant it to be. "Some kid dumped my lunch on me today." The words hung in the air. Her father didn't react right away. He was too controlled for that. But his eyes darkened slightly, his jaw tightening. "Who?" Jasmine hesitated. She didn't want to say the name. She didn't want him storming to the school and making things worse. Experience had taught her that calling out guys like Trent Dawson only made them worse. "It doesn't matter," she muttered. Her father's voice was calm but firm. "It does." She rubbed her hands together. "Trent Dawson." Something flickered in his expression. Recognition. Jasmine frowned. "You know him?" Her father was silent for a moment. Then he let out a slow breath. "I know his family." Jasmine scoffed. "Of course you do." Elliot tapped his fingers against the counter. "And the school?" "What did they do?" She hesitated. "Nothing." That got his attention. His gaze sharpened. "Nothing?" She shook her head. "Miss Reese showed up. Asked if it was an accident. I said yes." Elliot frowned. "Why?" Jasmine met his eyes, frustration rising. "Because, if I told the truth, nothing would have happened." "You really think they'd punish Trent Dawson?" "His dad's probably on the school board or something," Jasmine muttered. Her father leaned forward, arms still crossed. "And what message does that send?" She blinked. "What?" "When someone does something wrong," he said, voice steady, "and we let it slide, what message does that send to them? To you?" Jasmine had no answer. He sighed, shaking his head. "Jasmine, I get it. You don't want to make a scene. But letting things like this go? That's how people like him keep getting away with it." She clenched her jaw, looking away. I don't want to make it worse." Elliot stayed quiet for a long moment. Then he walked over and rested a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to fight this alone." Jasmine swallowed hard. She wanted to believe him, but she wasn't sure things could change. What she didn't know? Her father wasn't going to let this slide. And tomorrow, Trent Dawson would learn exactly who he'd messed with. Monday morning. Something felt different the second Jasmine stepped out of her dad's car. There was a shift in the air, whispers in the hallways, stares from other students. Not the usual smirks or sneers, but something new. Curiosity. Unease. Something had changed. She barely made it to her locker before she got her answer. "Dude, the police chief is here," someone whispered. Jasmine's stomach dropped. She turned toward the main office, and there he was, Chief Elliot Whitfield, standing tall in his uniform, badge shining under the bright lights. His presence alone made teachers stand straighter. "Oh my God," Jasmine breathed. Before she could react, the office door swung open. "Chief Whitfield, I really don't see why this had to be taken so far," said Principal Warren, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a tight smile. Behind him stood Miss Reese, along with Trent's parents. Jasmine's breath caught. Darren and Lauren Dawson looked exactly like she'd imagined. Darren, tall and broad-shouldered in an expensive suit, had the air of a man who never got questioned. Lauren, in a cream cashmere sweater, clutched her designer purse like armor. And then there was Trent, standing beside them, his usual smirk gone. For the first time, he looked confused, like he didn't understand how this had happened. Chief Whitfield didn't even glance at him. His focus was on Principal Warren. "I took it this far," Elliot said, voice calm but firm, "because my daughter was humiliated in your cafeteria, and your staff let it happen." Miss Reese cleared her throat. "With all due respect, Chief, No excuses," Elliot cut her off. "You saw what happened, and you let her take the blame." Darren Dawson laughed dryly, shaking his head. "Chief, come on. They're kids. It was just a misunderstanding." Elliot finally turned to him. "A misunderstanding?" His voice didn't rise, but it turned sharp, dangerous. "Your son targeted my daughter, bullied her, humiliated her in front of the whole school." Lauren sighed dramatically. "Chief Whitfield, do you know how often we get calls over silly things like this? Boys will be boys." Jasmine's fists tightened. Elliot didn't flinch. "That's the problem," he said. "People like you raise boys like him, and then wonder why they grow up thinking they can get away with anything." Trent shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, he looked small. Principal Warren forced another smile. "Let's not make this worse. Maybe we can work something out." "No," Elliot's voice was firm. "No deals. Just consequences." A heavy silence filled the office. Jasmine swallowed hard. She had never seen her father like this, not just as her dad, but as Chief Whitfield. Lauren Dawson sighed dramatically, glancing at her son. "Trent, apologize." Trent's jaw tightened. "Mom, now." He let out a slow breath and turned to Jasmine. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced with something new. Humiliation. "Sorry," he muttered. Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Louder." Trent's ears turned red. Through gritted teeth, he said, "I'm sorry." Jasmine knew it wasn't real. She knew he didn't mean it. But for once, he wasn't the one in charge. Elliot turned back to Principal Warren. "This isn't over. I want a full report. And if this school has a history of ignoring bullying, I will find out." Darren Dawson's face hardened. "You don't want to make enemies with the wrong people, Chief." Elliot met his stare. "Neither do you." Then he walked out. The aftermath, by lunchtime, the whole school was talking. Whispers followed Jasmine down the halls. Some kids avoided her. Others stared. A few even gave her small nods. Respect. Trent, though, he wasn't handling it well. She saw it in the way he stormed into the cafeteria, jaw clenched, fists tight. His usual confidence had been replaced with something uglier. Anger, shame, frustration. Jasmine knew guys like him. They hated feeling powerless. So when she walked past him to grab a tray, he muttered just loud enough for her to hear. "Guess Daddy had to fight your battles for you, huh?" Jasmine froze. The noise of the cafeteria faded. She turned slowly, meeting his glare. "What did you just say?" Trent took a step closer, lips curled in a sneer. "You heard me? You think this makes you special? That people actually care about you? The second your dad's gone, you're nothing again." Jasmine's pulse pounded, but this time she didn't walk away. She straightened her shoulders, lifting her chin. "You're mad." Trent blinked, caught off guard. "What?" She tilted her head. "You thought you'd get away with it, like always. But for once, someone actually stopped you." His sneer flickered. Jasmine took a step forward, closing the gap between them. "That's why you're mad. Because now everyone knows the truth. You're not untouchable. And now," she lowered her voice, "they don't respect you. They pity you." Trent's face turned red. "Shut up." She smiled. "Make me." For the first time, he was the one backing down. His fists shook, but he didn't say another word. Instead, he turned and stormed out, shoving past his friends. Jasmine exhaled, adrenaline still rushing through her. She could feel everyone watching, but for the first time since moving here, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel like an outsider. She felt seen. The shift. By the end of the day, things had changed. Kids who once laughed at Trent's jokes now ignored him. The whispers weren't about her anymore. They were about him. Trent kept his head down. Jasmine didn't need an apology. She didn't need him to admit he was wrong. Because the truth was simple. He had already lost. The moment her father walked into that office, the moment the school was forced to face the truth, Trent's power was gone. Without it, he was just another kid. The ride home, Jasmine climbed into her dad's car, shutting the door behind her. Elliot glanced at her. "How was school?" She hesitated, then smiled for the first time in weeks. "Not bad." Her father smirked, pulling out of the parking lot. "See? People like Trent only have power if you give it to them." Jasmine looked out the window. "Yeah, I get that now." A comfortable silence settled between them. Then Elliot spoke again. "You know, I didn't stand up for you because I thought you were weak." She frowned. "What?" He kept his eyes on the road. "I did it because I knew you weren't. I just needed you to see it for yourself." Jasmine's throat tightened. For so long, she had felt powerless, like the only way to survive was to stay quiet, to disappear. But today she learned something important. Standing up for yourself isn't about fighting back. It's about knowing your worth. And once you know that, no one can take it away from you.